I discovered my wife had been poisoning me slowly for years to collect my life insurance. The stomach cramps started about 3 years ago, subtle at first, like the kind you get from eating too much greasy food. I brushed them off as stress from work, maybe getting older, but they kept getting worse. By the second year, I was doubled over in pain at least twice a week, rushing to the bathroom with violent episodes that left me weak and shaking. My wife was always there with a glass of water and her homemade smoothies, telling me I needed to eat better, take my vitamins, rest more. She'd been making these special health drinks for me every morning before work, packed with fruits and vegetables she claimed would help with my digestive issues. The smoothies tasted slightly bitter, but she insisted that was just the kale and spinach. I trusted her completely, because why wouldn't I trust the woman I'd been married to for 15 years, the woman who held my head when I was sick, who drove me to countless doctor appointments when the pain became unbearable. The medical bills were piling up faster than we could pay them. Blood tests, colonoscopies, CT scans, endoscopies, and specialists who couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. One doctor suggested it might be Crohn's disease, another thought it could be a rare autoimmune condition. They put me on medications that made me feel worse, steroids that caused me to gain weight and feel constantly exhausted. My wife handled all the insurance paperwork, coordinating with doctors, keeping track of appointments, and I was grateful because I could barely function most days. The worst part wasn't even the physical pain, it was watching my life slowly slip away. I had to cut back on work hours, couldn't go out with friends anymore, stopped playing basketball on weekends because I never knew when an episode would hit. My wife kept encouraging me to take out more life insurance, saying we needed to protect ourselves financially since my health was so unpredictable. She'd researched different policies, brought me pamphlets, even scheduled meetings with insurance agents who came to our house. During one particularly bad episode last winter, I was bedridden for almost a week. The pain was so intense I couldn't even keep water down, and my wife was feeding me ice chips and clear broth. She'd sit by my bedside reading articles about digestive disorders, printing out information about experimental treatments, making lists of foods I should avoid. I remember feeling so grateful that she was taking such good care of me, that she wasn't giving up on finding answers when all the doctors seemed stumped. The turning point came when I had to miss my nephew's wedding because I was too sick to travel. My brother called to check on me, and during our conversation, he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. He said he'd been talking to his wife about my condition, and she'd mentioned that my symptoms sounded exactly like what her uncle had experienced when he was slowly being poisoned by contaminated water at his workplace. It was such a random comment, but it stuck in my head for days. I started thinking about the timeline of my illness, how it had gradually gotten worse, how it seemed to follow patterns I couldn't quite identify. I began keeping a journal of my symptoms, noting when they were worst, what I'd eaten, what activities I'd done. The pattern that emerged was terrifying because my worst episodes consistently happened on weekdays, specifically after drinking my morning smoothies. Weekends, when I usually skipped the smoothies because I slept in, I felt significantly better. The paranoia started creeping in slowly, like a poison itself. I found myself watching my wife more carefully, noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. How she always insisted on making my smoothies herself, how she'd get upset if I suggested buying pre-made ones from the store. How she'd hover around me after I drank them, asking how I felt if I needed anything. How she'd already researched symptoms online before I even mentioned feeling sick. I decided to test my theory in the most subtle way possible. I started dumping my smoothies down the sink when she wasn't looking, pretending to drink them while she was getting ready for work. Within a week, I felt better than I had in months. The constant nausea disappeared, my energy returned, and I could eat normal meals without fear of spending the next hour in agony. But I needed to be absolutely certain before I confronted her with something so devastating. The opportunity came when she went to visit her sister for a long weekend. I felt fantastic the entire time she was gone, better than I had in years. When she returned, she immediately resumed making my smoothies, and within 2 days, I was back to feeling terrible. The evidence was overwhelming, but I still couldn't bring myself to believe that the woman I loved was systematically poisoning me. I started researching poisons that could cause the symptoms I'd been experiencing. Arsenic was the obvious choice because it can be administered in small doses over long periods, causing chronic gastrointestinal problems, fatigue, and weight loss. It's also difficult to detect unless doctors specifically test for it, which explained why none of my medical tests had revealed anything conclusive. The more I read, the more convinced I became that this was exactly what was happening to me. But I needed proof that would hold up if I ever had to take legal action. I secretly collected samples of my smoothies in small containers, storing them in a mini fridge I bought for my home office. I told my wife it was for keeping my medications at the right temperature. Over the course of 2 weeks, I collected 12 different samples, each one carefully labeled with the date and time. Getting the samples tested was more complicated than I'd anticipated. I couldn't use our regular doctor because my wife handled all our medical communications, and I was afraid she'd find out. I found a private laboratory that would test for heavy metals and common poisons without requiring a doctor's order. The results came back positive for arsenic in every single sample, with concentrations that were definitely not naturally occurring. The emotional devastation was worse than any physical pain I'd endured. This woman I'd loved, trusted, and built a life with had been slowly killing me for years. I thought about all the times she'd held my hand in hospital waiting rooms, all the concerned phone calls she'd made to doctors, all the research she'd done online about my condition. She'd been playing the role of the devoted wife while methodically poisoning me, probably hoping I'd die before anyone figured out what was happening. I had to know how long this had been going on, so I started going through our financial records, looking for any unusual purchases or patterns. What I found made me sick to my stomach. She'd been buying rat poison regularly for over 3 years, always paying cash at different stores so there wouldn't be a clear paper trail. She'd also been researching life insurance policies online, reading about investigation procedures, and even looking up information about how long arsenic stays in the body after death. The life insurance policies she'd convinced me to sign were worth almost $2 million combined. She'd been the one to suggest the amounts, saying we needed to think about worst-case scenarios given my health problems. She'd handled all the paperwork, coordinated with agents, and even paid the premiums from our joint account. Looking back, I realized she'd been setting up my murder for years, creating a medical history that would make my eventual death seem natural and expected. I knew I had to be extremely careful about how I handled this discovery. If she realized I knew what she was doing, there was no telling how she might escalate her actions. She might try to poison me with something faster-acting, or she might try to make my death look like an accident or suicide. I needed to gather more evidence and get professional help without tipping her off. I contacted a private investigator who specialized in domestic cases. He advised me to continue pretending to drink the smoothies while secretly documenting everything. He helped me set up hidden cameras in the kitchen so we could record her preparing my drinks. The footage we captured was chilling because it showed her adding white powder to my smoothies from a small container she kept hidden behind the flour canister. The investigator also helped me contact the police and the district attorney's office. They were initially skeptical because cases of spousal poisoning are relatively rare, but the evidence I'd gathered was compelling enough to warrant an investigation. They advised me to keep following my normal routine while they built a case, which meant continuing to pretend to drink poisoned smoothies and acting sick when she expected me to be. The hardest part was maintaining normal interactions with her while knowing what she was doing. She'd ask about my symptoms, bring me heating pads for my stomach, make concerned phone calls to doctors, and I had to respond as if I still believed she was trying to help me. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me after I pretended to drink my smoothie, and I could see something in her eyes that I'd never noticed before, a cold calculation that made my skin crawl. During this time, I also discovered that she'd been researching my family's medical history, looking for hereditary conditions that might explain my symptoms. She'd been building a narrative that would support her story if anyone ever questioned my death. She'd even suggested to some of our friends that she was worried about my mental health, probably laying groundwork for a potential suicide scenario if the poisoning plan didn't work fast enough. The investigation took almost 2 months to complete. The police had to coordinate with multiple agencies, test evidence, and build a case that would be strong enough to secure a conviction. During this time, I had to continue living with someone who was trying to kill me, pretending everything was normal while knowing that each day might be my last if something went wrong. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning while she was preparing my smoothie. The police had been monitoring our house, and they moved in just after she added the arsenic to my drink. They had search warrants for our home and all our financial records. The evidence they collected was overwhelming, including the hidden container of rat poison, internet search histories, insurance documents, and months of recorded footage showing her tampering with my food. Her reaction when they arrested her was the most chilling part of the entire experience. She didn't deny what she was doing or show any remorse. Instead, she seemed angry that her plan hadn't worked, that she'd been caught before she could collect the insurance money. She kept saying that I was supposed to die from natural causes, that she'd been careful to make it look like a progressive illness, that no one should have been able to figure out what was happening. The legal proceedings took over a year to complete. During the investigation, they discovered that she'd been researching this plan for almost 5 years before she started poisoning me. She'd read books about undetectable poisons, studied case files of similar crimes, and even taken online courses about insurance fraud investigation to better understand how to avoid detection. The premeditation was extensive and calculated. The trial was a media circus because cases of long-term spousal poisoning are relatively rare and tend to capture public attention. I had to testify about the years of illness, the medical bills, the impact on my life, and the emotional trauma of discovering that my wife had been trying to kill me. The hardest part was describing how grateful I'd been for her care and support during my illness, not knowing that she was the cause of my suffering. She was ultimately convicted of attempted murder and insurance fraud, sentenced to 25 years in prison. The judge noted that the calculated nature of her actions, the extended timeline of the poisoning, and the sophisticated planning involved made this one of the most premeditated crimes he'd seen. He also commented on the psychological cruelty of caring for someone while simultaneously killing them. The aftermath has been incredibly difficult to navigate. I've had to undergo extensive medical treatment to address the long-term effects of arsenic poisoning, including liver damage and neurological issues that may never fully resolve. The financial costs of my medical care, the legal proceedings, and the psychological counseling have been enormous, ironically more expensive than the life insurance policies she was trying to collect. But the emotional recovery has been even more challenging than the physical healing. I've had to confront the fact that someone I loved and trusted completely was capable of such calculated cruelty. Every memory of our marriage is now tainted by the knowledge that she was planning my death, that every kind gesture was part of an elaborate deception designed to kill me slowly and collect money from my death. I've had to rebuild my entire understanding of relationships, trust, and human nature. The experience has made me incredibly cautious about letting people close to me, and I struggle with paranoia about food, drinks, and even basic interactions with others. Simple things like accepting a cup of coffee from someone or sharing a meal have become sources of anxiety that I'm still learning to manage. The strangest part is that I sometimes find myself missing the version of her that I thought I knew, the caring wife who took care of me when I was sick, even though I now know that person never really existed. Grief for a relationship that was built on lies is a complicated emotion that's hard to explain to people who haven't experienced it. I've also had to deal with the reactions of friends and family who knew us as a couple. Some people have been supportive and understanding, but others seem to question whether I should have known what was happening, whether there were signs I missed, whether I was somehow complicit in my own poisoning. The victim blaming has been almost as painful as the original betrayal. The legal system has provided some measure of justice, but it can't undo the years of physical and emotional damage, the medical bills, the lost time, or the fundamental violation of trust that occurred. I'm grateful to be alive, but I'm also angry about the life I lost during those years of illness, the opportunities I missed, the relationships that suffered because I was too sick to maintain them. Moving forward has required completely restructuring my life. I've had to find new doctors who understand my medical history, develop new routines that don't trigger anxiety about being poisoned, and rebuild my social connections with people who weren't part of my previous life. I've also had to be extremely careful about dating because the experience has made it difficult to trust new romantic partners. The financial implications continue to affect my daily life. The medical bills from years of unnecessary treatments, the legal costs, and the ongoing healthcare needs have created significant debt. Ironically, the life insurance policies she was trying to collect might have actually helped with these costs if they hadn't been part of her murder plan. I've learned that recovery from something like this isn't linear or predictable. Some days I feel strong and grateful to be alive, proud of my resilience and ability to survive such an ordeal. Other days I'm overwhelmed by anger, sadness, and a sense of loss that goes beyond what she took from me physically. The psychological impact ripples through every aspect of life in ways I'm still discovering. Despite everything, I'm trying to focus on the positive aspects of my situation. I survived something that could have killed me. I was smart enough to figure out what was happening, and I was brave enough to take action to protect myself. I've also learned that I'm stronger and more resilient than I ever imagined, capable of surviving betrayal and trauma that seemed impossible to endure. The experience has also given me a unique perspective on trust, relationships, and the importance of paying attention to instincts and warning signs. I've become an advocate for people in similar situations, sharing my story to help others recognize the signs of domestic abuse and poisoning. It's not a role I ever wanted, but it's given meaning to my suffering and might help save other lives. Looking back, I can see that there were warning signs I missed or dismissed. Her insistence on controlling my food and medications, her extensive research into my symptoms, her eagerness to increase my life insurance coverage, her detailed knowledge of my medical appointments and treatments. At the time, these seemed like signs of a caring wife, but they were actually signs of someone planning and executing my murder. I'm still processing the full implications of what happened and working to rebuild my life in a way that acknowledges the trauma while still allowing for happiness and connection with others. It's a delicate balance between protecting myself and not letting fear completely control my choices and relationships. The legal case is closed, but the personal healing continues. I know that I'll never be the same person I was before this happened, but I'm working to become someone who can incorporate this experience into a meaningful and fulfilling life. It's not the life I planned, but it's the life I have, and I'm determined to make it count.